have discretion over how they execute their codes. They can interpret their law in different ways. They can interpret the law favorably to support you, or if they don't like you, they can say, not for you, buddy, right? Or if they are going to, because they're professionals, they have discretion. Right? If they're going to cite you, if they're going to fine you or give you a ticket for non-compliance, they can choose whether or not they're going to do that. Let me give you an example of this. In New York City, there are about 12,000 street vendors. 12,000. Okay? Between the years 2006 and 2011, enforcement officers, police officers, enforcement officers, issued 123,000 tickets, right, to those street vendors. 123,000.
What's your ticket?
A ticket, yeah, I'm trying to think of a good, it's a citation for non-compliance. It's a code violation. It's a fine. Yeah, it's a fine. It's a fine, I'm sorry. It's a fine. Sorry. So they found, but they have discretion. And they don't have to fine everybody. They don't actually have to, they can give you a ticket, they can give you this thing that says you violated the law, but it can say €0, right? Or it can say 1,000 euros, right? But my point here is that of those vendors, those 123,000 tickets, they were issued by two different kinds of officers, two different offices. One was health violations, and the other was administrative code violations. So health, if the street vendor didn't have food at the right temperature, or if the space was not clean, or if they had a dog sitting, with, right? That's a violation of the health code.
A hot dog.
A hot dog? I was waiting for that. Thank you for playing. Administrative code, right? Administrative code is permits. Do you have a permit? Right? Is your permit expired? Right? Are you located where you're supposed to be located in the space? Different violations are going to, different kinds of people do different activities. The food vendors, that takes more capital, right? If I'm selling water bottles, right, I might be a new immigrant vendor. And I might not know the laws and the rules very well. And so I get these violations and I'm in trouble. I don't even know what to do with them. I don't have a permit. Right? So there's a lot of discretion that these officers have in deciding who can vend, where they can vend, and when they're going to be in violation for something. The health department, so my point here is that discretion is very important to try and understand. And those 123,000 violations, right now I'm doing analysis, right? To see, and one of the things that I found is that most fines go to administrative code. So most of the fines go to people who can least afford it. They're usually new immigrants, right? Or they're usually people who are less educated, right? So I don't know what the analysis is going to show. This is something I'm working on. I have one small document that I've prepared and shared with people, a working paper it's called. But discretion in the health department or in the administrative law is very important. If you can have a relationship with those people, you can influence them. Community and neighborhood planning. In the United States, there's a group of administrative and planning officials who are charged with neighborhoods and communities. Right? Relationships with them is very important because they're the ones who are helping the neighborhoods understand their particular management problems and advance in those management problems. So cooperation with them is important. Economic development. This is a question that came up yesterday. Will these businesses be viable? Will they make money? Or will they go from grant to grant? Are they true economic development opportunities? I would argue that in some cases, yes. Because in much of my research on street vendors, the street vendor part of my research, I have found that vendors usually start small and grow. And oftentimes they reach a point where they don't want to grow anymore because they've taken their money and they're investing it in their children. They're paying for their children's school. But some vendors, they want to grow more. And they eventually will move into stores, right? And grow larger from there even sometimes. So speaking of hot dogs, Oscar Mayer, right? They started, that's a big hot dog company, maybe you've heard of it, Oscar Mayer. That's okay, it's a very big hot dog company. They started as street vendors 120 years ago in Chicago. So small street vendors that you might see in your places, who knows what business they'll be in 30, 40, 50 years from now? We don't know. But it's possible to recruit economic development officials, right? We can get economic development officials and say to them, okay, you want to start, you want to have business formation plan? Work with vendors, work with people in markets. Ask if any of those people want to advance their businesses and give them the same training you give me. You know, the guy who walks in off the street. Yep. I want a business loan, I've got this business idea, right? Give the same thing to the street vendor, you know, who's just trying to make their way. Relationships with economic development. Waste. Waste is a big deal, right? Waste is a big deal. The sanitation departments are important partners. In cities around the United States, there's now small bins. You know how there's recycling bins you see all over the city here, right? In the United States, we have bins that come to your house for trash and for recycling. In many cities, there's 3 bins: trash, recycling, compost material. San Francisco has an entire citywide program for composting, right? I mentioned Growing Power's relationship the other day. I can't remember what San Francisco's is, but I think it's 600,000 pounds a day, 30 tons of composting material every day. Every day. Now, in the Netherlands, there's, and across Europe, but of particular interest is shared housing, right? In the Netherlands. So public housing, community housing, is important in the United States as it is in the European Union. There's some variation in those programs in the EU, just as there is between the EU and the United States. In Denver, Colorado in the United States, the Denver Housing Authority is advancing an important relationship between transportation, housing residents, and urban agriculture. And so they're locating markets and production, urban production, near new mass transit locations, so that commuters who are coming in from the suburbs can stop on their way to or from home or work and buy fresh produce from people in the housing, in the shared housing, in the public housing. Right? It's interesting. That partnership is between government, the Denver Housing Authority, and private organizations, Denver Urban Gardeners. Now, of course, there's a lot of things that they have to deal with there, like water. Denver's dry. Not a lot of rain falls, right? So they have a variety of natural resource constraints that they have to overcome. Soil conditions can be a problem. But still, even though there's a number of things you have to think about in planning for urban agriculture, there are opportunities, there are examples that are emerging around. Now, transportation brings up the idea of inter-jurisdiction cooperation. That is, cooperation between larger units, like municipalities here. A bunch of municipalities coordinated, or if provinces coordinated, or if autonomous communities. coordinated. In the United States, the big coordinating body is called the Metropolitan Planning Authority, or Metropolitan Planning Organization. And those organizations coordinate transportation projects. And those organizations are currently interested in developing better transportation opportunities for food grown in a region. So they're not thinking solely about a city, right? They're thinking about that city in its regional context. And that regional context often means working across state boundaries or working across autonomous region boundaries. So, one of the big projects that I'm involved with, this is the Mississippi River, right? Mississippi. Mississippi River. This is the state of Minnesota. I'm just going to draw the state names. You just believe me, okay? That's Minnesota. This is Iowa. And this is Wisconsin. Okay? There's an area here that, and this is Illinois down here. There's an area this big. I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of kilometers. It's a large area. It's about, this is about 300 kilometers from here to here, and about 150 kilometers from here to here.
It's like all of it.
Okay. It's about a third of the size of Holland, right? Holland's a little bigger than that. Okay. This area is its own geological area. It's 1 billion years old. It's called the Driftless Area. It's very unique geologically. Very geologically unique. And that uniqueness has provided for a lot of food that's unique to that region. That sort of like on this lecture where he talked about food that's kind of unique to this region. Now that doesn't mean that there's not similar foods in other places. Of course there's similar. But this area is developing its own identity. But because of its geology and because of the topography, it's very hard to get there. Transportation is difficult. So there's projects ongoing that are trying to establish better transportation, better coordination between the road system and railroads, and to enable the food, the product to get aggregated from the farms, right? So you got a bunch of little farms, and then so to bring the food to one point and then convey it someplace else, right? Move it someplace else. So this sort of activity until 30 years ago would have been very hard because of these state boundaries, because the states are autonomous, right? So the Metropolitan Planning Organization and other organizations, they're coming together to bridge these boundaries and establish that coordination. Where will interjurisdictional, where will cooperation come from in your situations? I don't know, right? You have to look for opportunities, though, to bridge across groups. Now, finally, I think it's important to think, when you think about the public sector, just to tag on things that you all have discussed, we got the public involved, right? Now, you all are familiar with Einstein's ladder of participation, right?
Yeah.
Remember Einstein's ladder of public participation?
We have another name. But
What's the name of it?
public. It's a Dutchman.
Ah, okay.
And he kind of reinvented that.
Right, okay. What's the top level of it? Does anybody know what the top level of it is? This is from 1960s, okay? At the bottom, how does, Okay, you guys talk for a minute. And look at this for a second. Yeah? Well, that's okay. Okay, so when we're talking about governance and involving the public in different ways in professional discretion, then we have to think about how we're going to engage the public. And in the larger set of slides, there's a little bit more discussion of this. But let me just point out to you this sort of metaphor of a ladder. And at the bottom of the ladder, the public is manipulated. Okay? So one way to incorporate the public would be to manipulate them and say, huh, this is what you want. You know, just come with me for a while. And, you know, I'll show you what you want, and then you can have it, and we'll all be happy. Right? At the top of the ladder is what? What's at the top of the ladder? Yeah. Citizen control. Self-determination. Right? But is that what we want? Solely self-determination? No, yesterday, remember, we're talking about self-reliance, which means you direct some, but you do it in partnership with other people. This is an old model, okay? And another part of it that's an old model is that it's a ladder. Do people actually, is that the way people participate in this sort of way? I would submit to you, I will suggest to you, that participation isn't so much, I participate this way, then I participate this way. No, it's kind of like frogs on a lily pad. You kind of jump around in different parts of your life, different roles you play. You participate and you're kind of jumping around. And so when we say to ourselves, why isn't the public participating? Maybe it's because they're participating in some other part of their life that's very important. And we just don't know it for our part. Maybe they're, you know, a frog that's jumping someplace else. Okay. So the things here that I just want you to think about, the two things that I want you to take away from this, is the top. What is the top? What is the most participation? What does it look like? Is it self-determination or is it partnership with other people? Right? A long time ago, we thought of it as self-determination. In our contemporary scene, we have to do everything we do in relationship. We have to build trustworthy relationships and advance on the basis of those relationships, those partnerships. Okay. Any questions? Any comments? Okay. Let me see here. Now let's do a few other public sector perspectives. One of the things that I enjoy a lot is working with students, okay, in doing their work. So everybody knows what slow food is, right? At the University of Wisconsin, there's a student organization called Slow Food UW. On Monday nights, they make a big meal, dinner, for everybody who wants to come. It's €3. And the students cook it, they source it, they acquire the food, they do it. And on Wednesdays, they have lunch. And they work with local farmers, they have their own business, they have their own licenses. Now when they started, right, I advised that group, I'm an advisor. When they first started, they found a place, not in the university, they found a church across the street, and they said, we want to do this. And the church said, okay, you can do it here, but what about your food service license? And what about insurance? And they said, we don't have it. The students said, we don't have it. So the church said, talk to your advisor. So they came in, so I said, well, let's go talk to the church. and we said to the church, look, we don't have license, we don't have insurance, we don't have experience. These students grew up, they didn't know how to cook until they're teaching themselves. They're teaching themselves how to do these things. You guys, you church organization, have to support us. We will buy stuff for your church. We will buy new refrigerators. We will venture, but we have to practice. And so they said, they thought about it, okay, what the heck? And we did it. And now, every Wednesday, they serve about 250 lunches. You know, for about 7, 8 euros. I mean, they make money. Right? Everybody gets paid fairly. And also, that organization serves as a CSA drop-off. So community supported agriculture, remember I told you? So students who want to be part of a farm make a deal, and every Wednesday they can go and pick up their basket of food. Do you see what you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Questions? You got any idea? So slow food is a interesting thing there at the University of Wisconsin, and it's growing around the country in those small university organizations. At the university, the food that's served at the university is slowly developing relationships with local producers, right? To address different things. Right now, you can get kosher, right? You can get vegan or vegetarian food, but it might come from 2,000 miles away. So the question is can we make it closer? Can we support the local businesses? There's waste initiatives at the university as well. So how to take the food waste. It's a big university, you know, about 35,000 students. The dormitories have about 8,000 students. You know, in the dorm, about 50,000 meals a day are served on the campus. That's a lot of food waste. What do we do with it? Now, of course, this assumes food safety laws and equipment and stuff like that. That's the story I just told you. If you have a good relationship, if you have good partners, sometimes you can avoid some of the laws and the legal constraints for a period of time, so that you can develop your experience, develop your routines, your habits, your new routines and new habits to get the new activity going. Right? Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. So let me see what time it is. We're going to go to lunch even a little bit earlier, maybe. So let me have a little bit of, let's see if we can discuss this. A lot of what we're talking about that I've mentioned yesterday and I'm going to mention again today is invisible. The laws are not visible, right? The larger pressures on people are not always visible. They're felt, you know, whenever people look at their paycheck or look at their gas bill, their bills. But a lot of it is invisible. And so, and the habits, whenever somebody is doing something with us, they're doing it because that is what they understand they need to do. That's their habit. That conforms, that's part of their way of doing things. Changing those organizational habits is hard. And it's usually, you know, as much a bottom-up process as a top-down process. But if you don't have cooperation from both sides, it won't happen. If you don't have support from administration, it won't happen. If you don't have interested people, it won't happen. So, finding who's interested and why they want to do something, why they want to see a change, is an important and difficult job. Experimentation is not always easy. Right now, in cities around the United States, there are new ordinances that allow people to have chickens in their backyard, have chickens in their yard. In smaller cities, why might this be a problem? Why might having small animals in your yard be a problem?
Smell, noise.
Noise, absolutely. People are going to get upset about the noise. Smells, absolutely. Why else might it be a problem?
Disease.
Disease, absolutely. Disease can get passed from animals to other animals to humans, right? Why else?
Organic waste. Organic waste.
Organic waste, that can be a good or bad. Chicken waste is very nutritious, right? But it can be a problem. What else? One more big one.
It could escape.
They could escape. They could. What's the opposite of the chickens escaping into the wild?
Wild animals.
Very good. Very good. What happens if the wild comes to the chickens? What's going to come eat a chicken?
Fox.
Birds. And what happens when, what happens if that fox misses that chicken and sees something else tasty? What else might be that fox might say, oh, I want a bite of that?
Baby.
That's right. A child. What's going to happen the first time? It hasn't happened yet in the U.S., okay? But what's going to happen the first time a fox or another small predator bites a child?
They will be hunted.
It's good. They're going to be crazy too.
Yes.
Not only will those fox, I mean, you know, already in the United States we're crazy about our guns, and I'm going to tell you, I have guns. Okay, I used to hunt when I was a kid. All right, but they're already stupid. They're already crazy. Everybody has too many guns already. So can you imagine? You know, I'm in my backyard. My neighbor is not far away from me. And a fox bites Andres when he's visiting, having a beer in the backyard. I get a gun out and start shooting at him. My neighbor's right there, right? Yesterday, right? Remember whenever we talked about how we have to anticipate, how we have to try to predict when there's going to be a problem, and then design relationships and regulations? This is a challenge. We need to think about. And be able to predict problems. You know, it's just a matter of sitting there and thinking about it. What might happen? You know? And, you know, I recommend highly the beer technique of thinking about that with other people, right? What might happen if we do this? And so one of the challenges right now is these ordinances. You can create new ordinances, but if you don't think about the consequences of those ordinances and sort of begin to plan for them a little bit, could get into trouble. Could be much worse than it otherwise would be. Could take a good idea, a good initiative, and crush it. Right? Gotta watch out for this. Gotta watch out for this. So I advocate, I'm a big fan of experimentation. We've got to experiment. But we also have to work hard to anticipate the consequences of our experiments. Okay. That's actually, oh my gosh, it's only 2:11. That's actually all I have for this part. So in this part, I wanted to give you some examples of code, of law, right, and of organizations, and emphasize to you and connect you, your discretion as professionals, and your relationship-making ability to these experiments that you can be part of, that you might be part of, or that you might see fit to recommend here. Okay? Everybody get it? Any questions? Any comments? Oh.
Should you? Should you,
Might have boots today.
should you always think about the risk?
Should you always think about the risk? Wow. You know,
Or yeah, you should think, but should you react on it?
yeah. There's different kinds of reactions. Should you always think about it? You know, I can imagine where the easy answer is yes, you should always think about it, right? But more interesting, right? What I think that you're asking, what I think you're talking about, is who all should you think about the risk with? Who should be part of the thinking about the risk? Right?
No, but should you let the risk stop you?
Well, we're going to get, you know, so one part of it, right, is who are the most relevant parties to considering the risk? But then also, how do you write an ordinance, or how do you write a law or a policy, or how do you present things to people in a way that helps them understand the potential problems, but also the potential benefits? Right? So, yesterday's slides, the city of Seattle could be these problems, but hey, you're doing it for these benefits, right? Likewise, this chicken thing. I can imagine a public setting, right? We're going to have a new chicken ordinance. Nobody comes, right? Sometimes people don't come to public meetings. Or a few people come to a public meeting because they want the chickens, right? And so you say to them, okay, you're going to get these chickens, and you have to go through these health code and other administrative processes. But then, what are you going to have to do? You're going to have to tell them, have you considered that your child might get sick from a disease past? Now, actually in the U.S. right now, there's some work on this, and there's actually very little evidence. You know, the passage of these diseases, there's some, but there's actually very little evidence, right? For chickens anyway. But the more kind of problematic thing are these predators that nobody thinks about, right? Because people they rarely see predators except whenever they travel cross country. And so, how do you say to them? How do you say to them, okay, what if a fox comes and your kid is outside and your kid thinks it's a big cat? Kitty, 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 kitty. Right?
But then you have a problem. Who is responsible for it?
Nobody.
It's nature.
It's nature.
Yeah.
Well, that might be the responsible
But it's
place.
America. I don't mean it negative, but
It's a litigious society.
I don't see it negative either, because why are the hens to blame for the fox attack?
No, but also, what's the chance that a fox gets your child? I mean, the child can be hit by a car, and I think you have to
Weigh the risk.
Weigh the risk,
Yeah. Well, you're thinking. And that's what, I don't have definitive answers to this.
risk is chance, effect.
Yes.
The effect is very big. So the chance might be little, but the effect is very great. So you have to consider.
Yeah, it's like a plane crashing. The chance of a plane crashing is very little, but if it crashes, the risk is very
That's
big.
it.
Yeah.
So you have all kinds of factors.
Yeah.
So, it's a good question. Who do you invite? How do you present the material? Right? These are important questions you have to ask whenever you're planning for this sort of thing. And in the course, when people start saying they want something, trying to work with them, because if somebody wants something, if they're adults, they've usually thought about the problems associated with what they want. Whenever you guys were 15 years old, were you aware of all the problems associated with the things you wanted? No. You just wanted them. Right? But most people have thought some about this. Right? That's a good comment. Are there other comments? Or other questions? Anything you'd like to say? Who should you invite? When should you consider the risk? That's a good question. Other questions?
One thing that caught a lot of my attention was when you said that the there should be interest both from the top and the bottom, so as to have both bottom-up and top-down decision making. And well, it was interesting because I think here in our country is what lacks in planning and everything. Maybe there is not an interest by the government, and there is not an interest by people either, and things don't work.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. Things won't work if government thinks that what it's doing is enough. That is not good governance, right?
Well, I was thinking...
And I mean, we can blame them, but that isn't going to necessarily change it. And same thing with people. You guys are trying to improve yourselves. You're trying to develop your capabilities by doing this. And I respect that. You know, and everybody here respects that. But even if you, but many people who you know are not doing the same thing. Right? I don't know what to say.
Yeah, no, I was thinking about the issue of the vegetable gardens, that there are a lot of initiatives going on, but there is not a real interest by the municipal government to support them. So
yeah, vegetable gardens, I think is a bottom-up process.
Yes, but we don't have the top-bottom process.
Well, so
in other things in Spain, you have top-down for laws or
the
transport.
The decision making is quite top-down. Normally, it's not usual to have the bottom-up decision making here in our country.
But isn't that the story Alfonso told us about the botanic gardens, that you have to talk to the right people and get them enthusiastic?
Finding who those right people are is a challenge, but it's possible to do.
Well, I've been trying to do so all this week.
Not too much enthusiasm, huh?
No, at all.
Well, you know, it is. I mean, it's a challenge to try and identify partners and get them to take some of their agenda and dedicate some of their agenda to you.
Well, I have to confess that the provincial council, as they were the promoters of the initiative, they had interest, and they are going to be tomorrow.
Good, that'll be interesting. So let's all be enthusiastic and smile at it.
Well, tomorrow we will visit the government, aren't we?
Well, yeah, we'll have the chance to interview the councillor of infrastructures, who is the person in the municipality responsible of the 21 agenda.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
But only one. Yeah. The councillor of environment didn't show any interest.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Here's something that when talking with people like this, I think it's a good idea not to ask them questions like why. Don't ask why questions. Ask how questions. Right? How does something work? How have you reached this decision? How is it that you think other people are thinking about this? Because if I ask you why, then that kind of puts you on the defensive. Why are you texting? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? That puts you on the defensive, right? Why are you, why do you beat your pet dog every other week? Why don't you beat your dog every week? Right? I do. Why don't you? Right? That puts people on the defensive. Why questions are difficult to answer sometimes. How kinds of questions, I don't know the equivalent to you guys' language, but I'm sure there's some equivalent. Other comments? So we'll be interested to ask how this person how it became important to them. There's often a story. This is something that I should say. What often convinces the people the most is a story of something, of how they've come to do something. The story of it is very important. Data is useful, but stories often move emotions. They move emotions, they change people's hearts. And so finding the story to something can really make a difference. So let's see if this guy has a story.
It's a woman.
Every woman in here can slap me. Other comments? Other questions? Other points? Huh? No? Okay, then I think lunch is served.
Okay, those of you